Library and Historical Society's live event with Mary Alice Monroe, author of The Summer of Lost and Found. I'm Kathy Jones, one of the Adult Services librarians, and I want to remind everyone that you can register for all of our programs at hudsonlibrary.org. We have Erin Brockovich coming on Earth Day, which is April 22nd, and you can register for that and all of our other programs coming up right now. Also, if you're watching us on Zoom, you feel free to put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can put your questions in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can at the second part of the presentation. Also want to let you know that tonight's book is available for purchase from the Learned Owl, our independent bookstore here in Hudson. And if you'd like to purchase one, there will be a link in the chat for purchase. So tonight, I'm really excited to welcome New York Times bestselling author Mary Alice Monroe. She's the author of 27 books, including the Beach House series. Her newest, The Summer of Lost and Found, is the 7th in the series. She is a 2018 inductee into the South Carolina Academy of Authors Hall of Fame, and her books have received numerous awards, including the 2008 South Carolina Center for the Book Award for Writing, the 2014 South Carolina Award for Literary Excellence, the 2015 Southwest Florida Author of Distinction Award, the RT Lifetime Achievement Award, the International Book Award for Green Fiction, and the 2017 Southern Book Prize for Fiction. Her best-selling novel, The Beach House, was made into a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie. I would also like to introduce our moderator, Diane Chamberlain. Diane is a New York Times, USA Today, and Sunday Times best-selling author of 26 novels that have been published in more than 20 different languages. Influenced by her former career as a social worker and a psychotherapist, she writes suspenseful stories that touch both the heart and the mind. I want to welcome you both and thank you for being with us tonight. Before I bow out and let you two talk, I'd like to ask Mary Alice to give us a quick synopsis of her new book, The Summer of Lost and Found.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for that wonderful introduction. I'm always, you always listen to those and you think, who is that person? It's always such a joy. Thank you. And thank you for welcoming Diane and I to the Hudson Library. It's a treat. And we wish we could be there in person. And Diane and I were talking in the green room and we think we want to visit in person together. So we'll keep that in mind. We'll come. All right, this is a quick synopsis of The Summer of Lost and Found. And it's been a very long journey to write this novel. Usually when I write a novel, there's a different process where I research some species of animal. But the species of animal in this book were human beings. I was very interested in what was the effect on our lives in this incredible phenomenon called the pandemic. And I created a story around a family that I knew really, really well, and that's the Rutledge family in the Beach House. If I was going to tell a story of family dynamics, what other family would I choose? So this is a family, if you've read the Beach House, that I've been writing for 20 years, and that takes me back. 20 years is a long time. And the characters have evolved, not only in character arc, but in age over those years. So now in this 2020, you have Kara, the heroine who was 40, who's now approaching 60. Her best friend is approaching 60. And Florence is now fragile in her 80s with Alzheimer's disease, which is a timely issue unto itself. Then you have the young'uns. I call it the next generation. And if Star Trek didn't take the title, I would have called it The Beach House, The Next Generation. And in this group, you have Linnea, who's the heroine, and she was, 6 or 7 or 8, very young in the first Beach House, and she's 24. And her brother Cooper, and all her friends. And the story is really part family dynamics, older generation, younger generation looking out for one another. Part young people, there's a love triangle there. Characters, if you've read the books before, you will recognize Gordon and John. They come back. It's young people losing their jobs, young people, their lives coming to a complete halt, moving back home, living with mom and dad again. That's a lot of family dynamics, and that all happens in this book. The challenge and the joy in the story is as they go through this summer, as I did, as we all did, there were actually more funny, joyous moments in this book as the characters relate to one another as they go through the ups and downs. At the very end, Linnea has to look back and make a decision about which gentleman she's going to choose to go with, and I won't tell you now. Please read the book. But more importantly, where she is at the end of this year like no other. What kind of decisions she'll make, what kind of realizations she makes about life. And I hope when you read it, you'll laugh because it's the funniest book I've ever written. It really is. Diane, you might, some of those scenes may make me laugh because they're young people. And I hope you see it as more a series of positive events, a series of smiles. Look back and say, oh, yeah, I remember that. Oh, yeah, yeah, I did that too. Those kind of connections. So it's not a plot that has a beginning, a middle, and an end where, you have a mystery. It's an evolution of a summer and people's lives. It's character driven. And I hope you enjoy it. And I know we'll get to a lot more about the book with Diane's questions.
And I have a lot of them.
Oh, good, good. I'll stop talking about my synopsis.
What you just said, that it's a character-driven book, and it's so wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
But what I kept wondering is, were you outlining or were you flying by the seat of your pants for this one?
That is the most important question. I am, as you know, Diane, a structuralist. I write from research. I choose a species, whether it's a turtle or a dolphin or a fish, whatever. I'm studying whales now. I do all the research on whales, really. I'm going to Mexico next week. I can't stand it.
Oh, wow.
So excited. And I research the animal and I get the themes and the storyline from what I learned from the animal. So I do a very strict structure, a beginning, a middle, and an end, story points, the themes, characterizations are built from characters I might have met. This book was nothing like that. I didn't know what was going to happen. I wrote in real time. I've never done that before, and I think it worked. And I don't know, you'll have to tell me if I should do it again. But I am a pantser in this one. Mm-hmm. And Diane, tell them what a pantser is.
You're flying by the seat of your pants.
Yes.
And you're really, what I love about, I'm both. I plot, and then what I always say is my characters never looked at my outline. So
I like that.
And what I think of, Mary Alice, is that my characters and your characters in this book definitely become kind of your coworkers.
Yes.
And so they have a say. And when they start doing something that I didn't expect, it's fun to go with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling that you did that with
a lot. Well, I think that's what was so different for me with this book, was not just that the characters were changing, because I was writing in real time.
Yes.
And I was making observations. I'm a naturalist. I look at the wild, I observe and put it in my books. I'm looking at what we are, and myself included, were going through. So what I wanted to say in April was not the same in July, because we were changing, and it was certainly not the same in November. And I tore my hair out. I don't think I'll ever be a pantser again. I like to know where I'm going. But in this case, my characters were evolving along with me. What I wanted to say to my readers about this summer like no other, this year like no others, I had to come to that understanding myself. And it was a torturous understanding, but I think I got there. I'm really pleased with my perception at the end.
Yeah, I thought about what it must have been like to write that. And it seems like it would be very scary to be writing about something as it's happening when you have no idea how it's going to play out.
I changed the story many times. And in fact, one of the more interesting parts was when, because young generation, they're in their 20s, and my daughter Greta is in her early 30s, and she was reading it and talking to me about plot. And there's a scene where whether or not this couple would, as they say today, hook up. And I was like, oh, no, it's not something I would do.
Maybe with a mask on.
At least not without a mask. But I'm more of a prude. And my daughter's, Mama, that's just not the way it is today. And she was keeping me young. And so I went in there and I tore it apart, and then I made them younger. And with her help, I do think that the generations are very clearly defined in this book, as we are in real life. But what I found out as a result of it is I was watching in my own family how the older people were taking care of the younger ones, like watching out for them, taking them in their homes like I did. People lived with me. But also the young people were kind of watching out for their older people too. Are you okay? Don't go out without your mask, Mom. Just being careful. So I thought that taking care of each other was a beautiful thing to watch.
I noticed that when I'm with my stepdaughter and I'm walking across uneven ground and she takes my arm. Oh, geez.
Oh, yes, we're there.
But that's something as I'm thinking about this book and about your other books too, there's so much love and support for one another that comes through, that I think that's kind of the ultimate. I think that's why people feel really good when they read your books, and that's really what people want right now, is to feel good.
Thank you. And that
without it being sappy.
Without it being sappy, I really work hard. My husband's a psychiatrist, as you know, and he works with me to make sure that the issues they're going through are, I don't describe the syndrome, and you're a psychotherapist, so you don't tell them, well, this person has a personality disorder, but you know the symptoms and you know how to bring it out and you know what's true and what's not. So I work really hard on that part. For this book also, it was a legacy that I realized after 20 years of a series, that I've been really blessed how successful it's been. That, 20 years with this book, the legacy of the Beach House was defined, where when Kara first came at the first time, and she came, the first book was a mother-daughter reconciliation novel. And she inherits the Beach House, and it becomes a place where women have come to when they needed help. And in this, over the years, Kara's lived in the Beach House, moved out, got married. Now she's in her home. And Linnea, the 24-year-old, is living, paying rent in the Beach House, and she's furloughed. That happens, no spoiler, that happens at the beginning. But it's a situation a lot of people found themselves in.
Sure.
And so someone she's working with is also furloughed, and the kids are wondering, how am I going to pay rent? So the legacy of one woman reaching out and helping another woman, saying, here, you can move in with me. It's like when I was a young mother, the story of the mushroom. And remember, the little mouse came under and all the animals were taking shelter from the rain, and they couldn't figure out how they could constantly squeeze one more animal in, and it was the rain. So I always saw the Beach House as kind of the mushroom, where people started coming in because of the pandemic, people without a place to go. And it was the love that's the rain. And that is the legacy of the Beach House. And it was passed down from one generation to the next in this book.
Well, the psychotherapist in me wants to know if this is a longing that you have. It's so 20 years with these people is a long time, and with these wonderful beach and the environment and the different houses and everything. And I really wonder how attached you are to these people. They're real to you.
Wow, that's a good question. I'm really.
Am I going too deep?
No, it's really interesting. I know them so well. You know, it's, and people say it must be easier to write the book. It really isn't, because when you know them so well, you know them, you know what makes them tick, and you know their foibles as well as their strengths. I always like to say I can put Kara in Walmart and I would know what she put in her cart. You know, I know that, I know what she'd pick. So saying goodbye to these characters is something I don't plan on doing. As long as I have readers, they get upset if I say I'm going to stop writing them.
Mhm.
So I feel responsible, but inside, yeah, Diane, it's hard to let them go, especially now that the youngins are coming up. You know, I like them, and they have their own sets of issues and problems, and it keeps me young. It's like being a mother watching your children. You know, they keep you young. So delving into the issues of the young people keeps me in touch with issues perhaps facing this generation.
Yeah. I kind of envy you with you always know who you want to write about. You always have these people coming up to
Well, I'm
focus.
letting it rest for a while. I've done a couple in a row now. And this one was a surprise. I had this other species I was ready to literally dive into. And I am taking a pause because I do need to write something else. You know, and when I have something I want to say, either about the, for example, when it was shorebirds were a huge drop. That's when I went to Beach House for Rent. I wanted to write about shorebirds because of the 70% drop in population. And there'll be something that'll bring me back to marine issue on our beaches. And when that happens, I go back to the beach house because that's the story that I know I can bring it into the folds of the family and the characters and where I live. That's why the book has lasted 20 years. It's not a book a year. It's usually a book
Yeah.
every 3 or 4 years.
And I want to point out for anybody who's not familiar with your books that you can really start with this book. It's not a series that you've got to read, book by book. I think you can start anywhere. But I love your other books. The Peace Like a River. What is the
Oh,
title?
oh yeah, A Time is a River.
Time is a River.
And that takes place in North
Beautiful.
Carolina.
Totally different.
I think that's one of my favorites. Thank you for pointing that one out. It's the dual timeline with the history and it was the first time I ever did that. And I'm a fly fisher, so the primary character is a fly fisher. And it was about a cancer survivor. And I wanted to tell the story again about the connection to life, is the parallel of when you fly fish, you catch a fish, and it's not about the catching, it's about the dance. And there's that life at the end of the line. And I think when you're a survivor of any kind of trauma, you need that thin line to connect you to hope, to life. And that was Time is a River.
Yeah, that's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
Another thing that I wonder about you, when I met you, which was 30 years ago.
Let's talk about that. Yes.
We both were part of Washington Romance Writers, and we stayed in the same room at a conference and got to know each other very well. And we both were working on our first books and reading each other's stuff. And it was just my lucky day to get to know you.
Oh, that's how I felt, except I should tell everybody. This was in Washington, and there are some really big name authors who had since become even huge authors. But Diane shows up, and she is the winner of the most major prize of Romance Writers of America. And we were like, ooh, she must be really good. And you were. The name is The Lighthouse Book. Or
no, it was actually Private Relations, which is a book that I tell people not to read.
Oh, I think that's so funny.
It's just very romancy, unlike what I write today.
Well, mine was
yours was about the sheep farm.
Yes, and it again, wouldn't you know, it's about animals. And
well, go ahead.
That sheep farm, in all honesty, I was, it was my family farm, but my brother-in-law is a sheep farm. But they say write about what you know. But that house that big old house that you could ride bikes on in that was unfinished. That is our house in Vermont. So I really know that place. And it is funny to look back at an author's line of work and you say, where did she start? And sometimes you can see, you can trace an author's interests for a career. And I think that would be true for you too, Diane, because your books are always, as a therapist, your books are always social work, like you said,
Yeah.
always about deep issues. And especially for a woman's life, a lot of the real deep concerns and social issues.
Yeah, they're my turtles.
Yeah, all right. For those of you who don't know, there are turtles in this book too. I am a turtle lady. I am a turtle lady on Isle of Palms.
But okay, so you grew up in Chicago and you lived in the Washington, D.C. area for
yes,
a long
my
time.
husband, yeah, he was at the NIH. Yeah.
That's where we met.
Yes.
And it really seems to me that when you got to the Isle of Palms, this whole new Mary Alice emerged.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's really true. I always was someone who loved nature and the wild, and my husband's family are very strong in conservation, that land in Vermont. And of course, when I was there, I learned a lot about husbandry and horticulture and all those years we spent on this in the summers there. I worked on the farm. And when I moved to Isle of Palms, my husband had taken us to, he accepted a position, and we'd been coming to Isle of Palms from Chicago and then NIH, Washington, D.C., for about 10 years before we moved there. So we knew we wanted to move there, but we had to wait until he got a position. So when we got there, the very first thing I did was join the turtle team, because my sister, who's a Floridian, described for me about how a sea turtle comes ashore with that tank-like crawl. And they went from a dinner party and they were very respectful and quiet. And she described how the turtle dug with her rear flippers the nest and laid the copious eggs. But as she laid the eggs, she had tears. And Diane, that metaphor of a mother's tears, every once in a while when I hear something or an idea, and it's a kind of knowing, it's like your blood races, okay, this is something I'm going to write. You know what that is. It's instinct, it's intuition. Joseph Campbell says artists have that intuition with the shamans of today. I know that's true. So I kept it in the back of my mind. And when we got to the Isle of Palms, the first thing I did was join the turtle team. I didn't know anything about turtles other than what I read about in a book. But I'm very, it's my nature to dive in. I get very passionate. And I started shadowing what we call the core team, those who are permitted. And I did every job. I went everywhere. And they finally said, Mary Alice, just get your license. So I did. And that was 20 years ago. And I now can monitor the nest. I move the nest. I make decisions for the nesting cycle. And I also then subsequently joined the aquarium, and I worked with rehabilitation of sea turtles, and I'm on the board now. And I still am on the board with leatherbacks, those huge, you think loggerheads are big. They're toys compared to the leatherbacks that come ashore in Costa Rica. But over the years, it's just began this process where when the beach house was a hit, because I changed the way I wrote books. I didn't write from archetypal themes. I wrote from, like I described earlier, from what I learned about the animals. And from that, I created themes. And I created a process that was for me. And I think I found my voice, to answer your question. And when that was a success, it's enabled me to move on to other species. So for 20 years, I've written, about so many different species, but it's where I belong. It's like I came home to it.
And for your reader, it's educational without feeling like you're being taught anything.
Well, thank you. I call it a painless education because that's not my job. My job when I write a novel, I mean, your job when you write a novel is to entertain the reader.
Mhm.
You know, we're telling a story, we're bringing you into our world. But I really have had, Diane, a mission for the past 20 years. I mean, this was something I sat down and decided to do with the Beach House. I was going to write fiction that was entertaining. I didn't want to speak to the choir. I
Right.
wanted to write books that were pleasant, that were set on a beach. So when you go on vacation, you're right there with that book in your hand. I wanted people to fall in love with the characters and the story and cry. But when they shut that book, my mission was that they would say, you know, I learned a lot about turtles and I'm going to turn off the lights. Or if you go to the beach, I now know I read Beach House for Rent. I'm not going to let my dog chase those birds because now I know they're resting and I feel if I can do one little lesson that my readers then care about the animals, that they'll make an act. It's a call to action in a
Yeah,
sense.
it makes me think. I have a condo on Topsail Island right on the beach, and it makes me
Yes.
think I need to go out there and pass out your books. Well, people with their dogs and their,
Yeah. Well, that's
pets.
right. That's a beautiful place to have a condo. It
Yeah,
really
it
is,
is.
And again, we were always said we were going to do a book signing together there.
Yeah,
But who does book signings anymore, right?
well, not right now, that's for sure. Which makes me wonder what your book tour is going to be like this year.
Well, I was supposed to be visiting Hudson in real life, and I am so grateful that I get to visit you with Diane tonight. Most of my book tour will be virtual.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's a way we're dealing with the pandemic. I am having a few very small 50-person limited events. And it's just because I want to. I miss it. I miss going out and talking to my readers. But I do appreciate that I don't want to put my readers or my visitors in danger.
Sure.
And so I'm just going to wait until I get permission. But I think all authors now are being faced with not just what's good for us as our tour, but what's good for our readers. And also, I really support independent booksellers, as do you. And I think one nice thing about the virtuals too is that like tonight, you're with the books. Please buy your books today for both Diane and me, and anyone you want to buy from your indie bookstore, because this is a very difficult time for them as well.
Yeah.
And they really do need all of our support. It's part of our community. And so I don't really have I used to go out for 6 weeks, and I'm just going out for a couple days. And then
Right now it feels very strange to think about the way we usually tour.
It is. But I do get to go to Mexico to study whales. So I'm very excited. I'm braving the plane. I'm vaccinated.
I have one more question before we turn it over to the audience. I need to go on retreat to work a few times during the course of a book, which usually means I'll go to my beach place by myself or with another author. And I know you have a mountain place. Did you get that to be your writing retreat?
I did. Oh, yes, Diane. And actually, I was hoping that we'd all get together up here. I did. I love the ocean. I love the beach, but my grandchildren and children come visit all summer long. And it's also a place where people can tug on my sleeve and ask a question. Sure. It's my home. So when I write a book, I like to hide, because I could never write a book, say, like J.K. Rowling in Starbucks. I know you do, though. You do. You do. I just I get very almost frightened or timid when I write. So I need to be at my desk. I can't even go to another room in the house. I have to be in one spot where I know where it's like Captain Kirk at his, station. And I have everything around me, all my books, all my notes, and I just dive in. And when I'm really clicking, there is no time. Yeah, I just write very, very. Are you a fast first draft writer?
No,
Oh.
no, it's a long story.
Oh,
But let's turn this over to your audience. I think Kathy
okay.
has some questions for us.
Yeah, so this is really a fascinating discussion, and I know everybody's enjoying it. Before I start with the questions, there were a couple of comments on Facebook, and I want to just share those with you.
Okay.
One person said, our adult kids have been extremely vigilant and protective of us throughout the pandemic. And then another Facebook comment, my two favorite authors, this is wonderful.
Yeah, we're taking it on the road. We are coming to Hudson.
Oh, well, we want you to do that. So please, I hope you're serious. All right. So questions. Well, actually, this one's not a question. Not a question, but wanted to say I'm happy to be here with Mary Alice. She is my favorite, and I have all of her books.
Oh, thank you. That's a lot of books, and I appreciate it.
That is a lot
Diane,
of
you and I
books.
are neck and neck, aren't you? Because you have 26, 27 books.
27.
Yeah,
Yeah,
see, we're neck
you
and
guys,
neck.
are you racing?
Like she said, we started out at the same year.
Right.
So we kind of kept a pace.
That's impressive. Okay, here's a question. I loved the Summer of Lost and Found and really enjoyed getting to know the younger generation better. When will we get to meet them again? One of my favorite series, 3 exclamation points.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, someone got an advanced reading copy, which is great. And my apologies always, because when you write a book a year, that's a pretty tough schedule. And so I don't have that year extra time to polish. I usually finish the book, and the advanced reading copies might have errors in it. So I apologize for that. And even the very ending, I tweaked. Like, ooh, I used the same word twice in a paragraph.
I didn't see any.
Oh, thank you. Well, I finessed a little bit more, but thank you for saying that. And I will write the Beach House series again. I left it open to continue at the end of this book. I just don't know when the next one will be. There's another series, the Low Country series, that people also love. And that book, that series, as Diane said, this one you could read any book out of order, and it's a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the Low Country series is meant to be read in order. So be aware of that when you read that series. I don't know if I'll ever have time to go back to that series, and I loved it. But the Beach House, I will.
Excellent. And I'm sure everybody is very happy about that. Somebody else asked, what are the books on top of Mary Alice's bookshelf?
Well, I do Friends and Fiction. Oh, by the way, you're all invited to Friends and Fiction. It's the weekly show we do Facebook Live, and it's on YouTube, and it's with Mary Kay Andrews. I'm going to go alphabetically. Mary Kay Andrews, Patty Callahan Henry, Christy Woodson Harvey. That's not alphabetical, but anyway, and Kristen Harmel. And Diane was our guest, one of our early guests. And it's a wonderful show with authors talking about books. So this is my station when I'm at the house. So you have my books behind. Those are some of my books. Like this is Beach House Memories, which is, I think, the best love story I wrote. It's the story of the prequel to the Beach House. And it takes place in 1974 because my daughter said, Mama, I don't know why Lovey just didn't leave her husband. And this was 1974 in Charleston, and south of Broad. You didn't just leave your husband. She would have lost her children. It was very complicated. So I wrote that book to explain a love story, a true love story of a man and a woman who are married to other people. And it's difficult. But these are all different books that I've written. A lot of them are standalones, as Diane had mentioned. And my husband came to visit me. He arrived in North Carolina. Always marry a man who brings you flowers.
Oh,
He's very supportive.
That's so sweet. And it sounds like he's not only supportive, but he's very helpful.
He is. He doesn't read my books through. Like he figures by the time I finished it, we've talked about it so many times, he doesn't want to read it.
No kidding. They never read the final.
Does John read yours? No?
Not the final version, that's for sure. He only reads the one where he tells me everything that's wrong with it.
Oh, that's the
Oh.
one. And we're so grateful. Diane, tell them about your books, though. I think your book, Diane has 27 books, and her last book that she was on in 2020 came out in 2020, right?
Correct.
Big Lies in a Small Town, and it's a wonderful book. Tell them a little bit about it.
It's set in a small town in North Carolina, and in 1940 there was a woman hired, an artist hired to paint a mural for the post office, and terrible things happened to her in that town, and the mural disappears and she disappears, and then current day a young artist is hired to restore the mural that's unearthed, and as she's restoring it she discovers clues to the disappearance of the first artist. So it's kind of a typical one of my books where there's a lot of mystery about what is going on, and some interesting characters, I hope.
I loved it. I mean,
Thank you.
But for a number of reasons. Number one, I love your writing. I think you're a beautiful writer, truly. But also, my daughter's a muralist, so it was really
Oh, wow.
in the story, and it takes place in the South.
Mhm.
And the last couple books have taken place in the South.
I know half of my books now have taken place in North Carolina. I think you and I found our homes.
That's
When
true.
we went south.
That's true. She's up near Raleigh area, where I need to get to more often, Diane.
So I actually have another comment here. So glad to be able to join this Zoom, as Mary Alice is my favorite author.
Oh, thank
and
you.
I also have read and own all of her books. So,
Yeah, that's a lot of books. Thank you.
And,
I take that to heart. I truly do. Thank you.
well, you know, it's interesting to me that you know, that when you, I guess when you started to write the beach house books, that you got onto all these environmental issues and the animals. You know, I find that totally fascinating. And I was actually looking at your website, and on some of the page, one of the pages, it lists like every environmental issue you've ever put into one of your books. And really, there are what, 9 or 10 of them? Yeah. And now you said the next one's going to be whales. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Or?
I eventually, it takes me several years of research to actually get enough material to write the book. So I'm actually beginning a book that is set in an area called the Ace Basin. Oh my gosh, it's the first time I've mentioned it. So hush, don't tell anybody. But it's the most beautiful area between, we all know where Hilton Head is, or Beaufort, South, and Charleston. Is a lot of land grants, a lot of land and conservation. And I'm really interested in land that is protected, habitat for animals, the gift of land for conservation. So I'm telling a family saga. So I know this story. I mean, I know about the Ace Basin. But while I write this, and it will take me a couple of years, I'm not going to rush this book. I'm taking it a little bit slower. I am getting it to a certain age.
Same here, girl.
You know, I want to visit my grandchildren a little bit, but it'll take me a couple of years to study whales. But that brings us to a really important point about, for both Diane and I, about, the making choices now for the books that we write. And I think one lesson I learned while writing this book, The Summer of Lost and Found, the lesson, what did I learn in this real-time book? To slow down, to not rush, we're so lucky to have our health, to be alive, that to enjoy each day, to live in the present, because we can't plan for the future. Every plan we make, whether for book tour or to go maybe see your son for his birthday, you might not be able to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And that's what we learn, the zig and the zag. And so instead, rather than live in the future or worry about it, I think the lesson for 2020 was slow down and live each day. Enjoy it. And that is my decision, Diane. We were talking, I'm not going to rush. I'm going to enjoy the writing, enjoying my grandchildren, enjoying the mountains, or the beach, or my good friend, to have time to say, Diane, let's have lunch, rather than always being under deadline.
Exactly. You get really tired of saying, I can't do that because I have to work.
Yes. I'm here in the mountain house, and my grandchildren came to visit 2 years ago. They couldn't come during the pandemic. And my grandsons went out with my husband to see the sights and to go hiking because I was under deadline.
Yeah.
Now I love what I do, and then so do you, Diane. But now I'm appreciating that I want to spend a day with my grandson.
I think that the thing is we have to find that balance.
Yes, and that is the heart of the book. Since we're talking, that is what I learned, and that is what all my characters did in this book, The Summer Lost and Found, is learning to, what is it, number one, I really want. A lot of redirection of goals for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people switching their careers as a result. What do you really want? And how are you going to spend the next chapter of your life? I think those are important questions to ask after we all survived the pandemic.
We're in a lucky position that we can figure that out.
I think so.
I feel for people who have been hurting so much this year and don't have those options.
And that is with the legacy of the beach house, reaching out. I think that's another lesson of how it's not only the duty to reach out, but the joy and the full sense of gratitude and fulfillment to be able to help another person.
True.
That's the true legacy.
Giving us a lot to think about. We have a few more questions that have come in. Mary Alice, I'm so excited to revisit with some of my favorite characters. Which character is closest to your heart? I love, love, love friends in fiction.
Oh, thank you. And everyone, please join us Wednesday night at 7:00. Which is my favorite character? It's changed. When I first wrote the book, I really was bonded to Lovey, who was the mother. She was just the ideal quintessential Southern woman. She was gracious. She loved her children. She had a strong backbone, but and she loved turtles. So how could I not love her? But as the stories go on, it's Kara, of course. And I grew up with Kara from her 40s to 60s. And it's, I have enjoyed watching this character become the matriarch of her family, as I have become the matriarch of my family. And there's a wisdom in that role, hard-won wisdom in being a matriarch. And I think Kara now is definitely my favorite.
Okay, and another one. I love your books, Mary Alice. Will you ever set your books outside of the South?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's interesting. I've written a lot of books in the South, but I have a couple books that are coming that are way far from the South. In fact, my early books were in the Midwest. I had the Four Seasons of Chicago, and the Girl in the Mirror was California. And, the book y'all have to read. It's the best book no one ever read. Second Star to the Right.
I love that book so much.
I did too. I wrote that when we were hanging out in DC.
Yeah.
And it's a story of a 90-something-year-old woman who lives in London, an old brownstone, who believes she's Peter Pan's Wendy. And I actually got the rights back to that book. You can only get it online or whatever, but it's a great little story. And that takes place in London. So yes. And I'd love to write about the vineyards. Wouldn't you love to go to a vineyard and research that? Oh, Diane, you don't drink wine. Maybe not. I think a vineyard.
It would be pretty.
Yeah.
So when book tours start again, will Mary and Diane tour together in Western North Carolina? Would love to see them in Hickory.
Well, that would be
Hickory.
fun.
Yes. Let's just say yes. Yes, we will. I love Hickory. I'm in Tryon now, so Hickory's not that far from you, Diane, right?
No, it's about 3 hours. I've set
It's 3 hours. We can go furniture shopping while we're there.
Oh, that would be great. I better buy a place to put the furniture in.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes, Diane and I will. We don't know, I can't promise a date, but we would love to.
Sounds good. Another question for this one is for Diane. Is Diane going to release a new book this year? What is she working on?
Yeah, I apologize. It's not coming out until January. So not quite in 2021, but January 2022. And it's called The Last House on the Street. And it has to do with, here I am with my social issues again. It has to do with the 1965 registering of Black voters when the Voting Rights Act was passed.
Very timely.
We're still dealing with today.
Very timely.
Wow. Well, we'll look forward to that one for sure. Back to Mary Alice. I read The Beach House several years before we migrated south to Brunswick County. We have a very active turtle patrol at Holden Beach. They
Yes.
do a great job of watching out for our turtles. I learned so much from all of your books, birds, pelicans. Thank you so much for the education. So that's not a question.
Well, thank you for saying that, because that is the why of the writing. That's why, that's the motivation behind the stories. You know, each story is its own, but that is, like I said, a real motivation for me for 20 years. I may go astray though, coming up in the next few years. And in the next chapter, I have a couple books that I think will surprise you.
Well, we're looking forward to that. I know your readers are, because the comments just keep coming in. I love the second star to the right, Mary Alice, one of my favorites of yours.
It's one of my favorites. So I just think, I can't believe it's not a movie. Come on, it's Peter Pan.
Well, you have to work on that then.
I love it. I am a James Barrie file. And for people who read that book, if they loved the book, Peter Loves Wendy. No, Peter and Wendy. There were actual lines from that text in the book. So it's like peppered in to add a little fun for the people who really know that book. But the themes and the storylines of Peter Pan's by the great James Barrie are in that book. And it was so much fun to write. My mama was dying when I wrote that book. And I just needed to write something uplifting. And it's a love story. It really is. It's a love story. What goes on in this little brownstone. But up on the top floor is this, they call her Crazy Wendy. And it's a good story.
If you have the rights back, Mary Alice, what are you going to do with it? How can people read it?
Well, it's interesting. I put it out, I updated it, and I put it out, and you can buy it self-published.
Okay.
I did that. And there's the other one that's a fantasy book is One Summer's Night. And I don't want anyone to buy the old copies because it's about fairies and it's a beautiful story. It's my other passion is fairies. In fantasy, there's Peter Pan, fairies, and mermaids. Mermaids I still have to write. But I rewrote it. And Signe Pike, who's a historical writer, really wonderful writer, she's also an authority on the world of enchantment, let's put it that way. And she wrote a book called Fairy Tale. So she wrote the foreword. I'm glad this came up. And I rewrote the book, and I expanded the mother-daughter relationship in that. So I'm going to self-publish that.
Good.
Probably, gosh, next year. I keep wanting to do it, but I'm pacing myself. I'm not going to rush, but it'll be One Summer Night again. But don't buy the old one. The new one's going to be better.
So will these both be available on your website then, because they're
If
self-published?
you go online to Amazon
They'll
or
be
to
on
any
Amazon?
or Barnes and Noble or bookshop.org, any online store, you can buy it.
Okay,
And Apple.
excellent, excellent. And we have another comment. I am glad you're doing some in-person events, Mary Alice. See you in Greenville in May.
Oh my gosh, you're going to, I'm just blanking on the name of the store. It's Judson's. Yes, see you there.
That's awesome. I'm glad you're able to do a few in person.
Yes, I think, Diane, don't you agree? It's nice to have that interaction.
It really is. I'm
I
trying
miss
to picture it though. It's going to be so different.
It's going to be a first step. I think we're able to, I won't be able to be up close and hear the stories that I love
And
to hear.
shake hands and hug.
And shake
And I love hugging my readers. And I think that's over for a while.
You know what I'm thinking of doing? Okay, let's poll the audience. I think we should bring back the gloves of the 1950s.
Oh, this is a great idea.
I'm buying little colored gloves, black and tan and white, and I'm just going to shake. I'm going to wear gloves and wash them when I go home. And I just love gloves and hats. I think we should bring it back. That was real style.
Great idea.
Sounds like fun. Yeah, I mean, as librarians who have these programs, of course, we miss them too. You
Yeah.
know, Zoom is wonderful, and there are definitely some upsides to being able to do these Zoom things, but there's nothing like in person and people being able to stand in line and talk to you and
Yeah.
get your signature in their book and ask their questions. It's
But
just,
you know, Kathy, what works is why I'm glad Diane's here. It gives a sense of a give and take.
Mhm.
So it's much more fun, you know, that we can be chatting.
Absolutely.
It
And I
just
finally get to see Mary Alice.
finally get to see Diane.
So we're your catalyst, huh?
Yes, thank you.
Our pleasure. So let's see. We have a couple more comments. Great idea, Mary Alice. Love hats and gloves. And another person says yes to gloves.
It just makes sense. We all better get them because we're all going to start buying them. So
Right,
buy when the
exactly.
price goes up.
Oh, well, I know I'm old enough to remember wearing gloves as a young person, so
Yes.
why not?
We used to have to wear gloves for weddings and things like that. The
Mhm.
white kid gloves with a little button.
Yes.
I'm giving away
Yes.
my age. But
No, I remember too, so it's okay. So I guess we have time for a couple more questions. I suspect I already know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you ever worry about running out of things to write about?
oh, what do you think, Diane?
I don't think so.
Either one of you?
Never.
Not either one of you.
No, I mean, there's so many species. Just species. Let's just start there.
There's so many social problems.
There's no shortage. Like, you know, ready to. I have ideas, and I just have to get an instinct. And you probably do too, Diane. That it's time to write about this now. You know, I have all these possibilities, but I know I'm supposed to write about whales, and I've been getting. You know, you notice signs on the wall on the highway or a show that you're watching, and it's just little triggers. That's
Right.
the universe talking.
Sparks. People send me ideas, including my sister, and I can't work that way. It's got to be that spark that when I think of something, that's going to be it.
And that blood goes. I was in the aquarium. I'm on the board, as you know, and we were having a think tank for those of us who are on the animal care committee. And the head of NOAA for the area came, Dr. Fair, and then Philippe Cousteau, who's Jacques' grandson, came. And they gave a presentation, and they were talking about how the dolphins were 50% of them, of the resident dolphins in the United States, but they did a study in Charleston and in Florida. They were sick. And Philippe said, Mary Alice, please, because he knew that people would read my fiction novels who would not read a nonfiction magazine article on dolphins. See, I'm reaching an audience that they can't. And he said, please write a book about dolphins now. And that's when you sense, you get that feeling. And I knew it was time because dolphins was on the list. Who doesn't want to write about this wonderful creature? But I did not want to write Flipper.
Yeah.
Flippers actually caused a lot of problems with the population. But when he was defining the issues, I knew, okay, I can bite into this. I can present a story that has real feeling and meaning. And when that happens, you know, you pick it off the shelf and it's time to, just like your issue for your next book, Diane, it's timely. Yeah. It's going on right now. It's time to take that idea off the shelf
Yeah.
and write about it
I
now.
didn't select it because it was timely. I didn't know how timely it was going to become. And I don't know if it'll be timely unfortunately, it probably will be timely in January, but it's the burning issue, like what you're talking about, that buzz.
Yes.
Just, it has to be written.
Mhm.
Well, I think we're run out of questions, and it's just about time. It's just about 8 o'clock. So I want to thank you both so much for joining us tonight. It was just a really fascinating discussion. I know we just love getting into your heads and learning what makes you both tick and write these wonderful, wonderful books. I hope you were serious about joining us in Hudson as soon as it's safe, because we would love to have you both. And I want to thank everyone who's joining us tonight for being here. Don't forget to check our website for all our upcoming programs. And please, please buy the books. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night and happy reading, everybody.
Happy reading.
Thanks for inviting me, Mary
Good
Ellen.
night, Diane. Thank you so
fun.
much for coming. It was. Thank you, Kathy, and everybody at
You
Hudson.
bet.